Johnathon Humphrey wasn't particularly old. Time had just somehow left him out in the cold. He was a scientist with talents extraordinary, and his tasks in life were far from ordinary, for he had made the invention of all time, and time was the operative word. From his laboratory its hum could plainly be heard, for his invention was a time machine that efficiently would transport him far from this scene, just as far back as he wanted, through the mists of time. Why, he'd even been right back to the Pliocene. But the time he preferred to visit was the Victorian age, when the penny farthing and the hansom cab were all the rage. Life then was so simple and elementary. Yes, that was the time for him, the 19th century. He went back in time with stronger and stronger ardour, which made his life in the present for him harder and harder. The trouble being that time couldn't for long be his host. The warp in time he created only lasted an hour at most. Every minute he savoured with relish, which made coming back all the more hellish. He hated the bustle and rush that exemplified today. He loathed it excessively in every way. He had no time for things as they now were. He longed for the peace of yesteryear. If only the motor car hadn't been invented. It was on this object all his hate he vented. Oh, to bring back the day, and without too much delay, when the only means of road transport was the robust and faithful horse. But there was a way, of course. Go back in time, and the inventor seek out, and explain all the harm his invention would bring about. Then there'd be no more angry motorcycles to blast our ears, and no more drunken drivers to fill us with morbid fears. Jonathan went to the public library to trace back mechanical history, but after searching all day, the person who started it all was still a mystery. There seemed to be several people working towards the same end around about 1870. Names and facts Jonathan had aplenty. Being a scientist, he had access to a top space shuttle computer. Now he visited the facility so often he almost became a commuter. He fed in all the information he could find, names, dates, methods. If it had relevance to the car, he didn't mind. After a whole year of feeding in information, the answer he finally got was rather a revelation. The inventor wasn't Mr. Mercedes, Mr. Benz, or Mr. Ford, as he had expected. The computer all these names offhand rejected. There was someone who first planted the seed of an idea in all their minds. The computer couldn't be wrong. This person had all the right signs. And person was the operative word, for the inventor was a woman. How absurd! He looked at the card of a photo of a woman in a bonnet, and her name and address were also upon it. Miss Rosemary Young, of Friars Court, Golders Green. Jonathan's machine sent him back through the mists of time, leaving the smog-bound 1990s decades behind. He would automatically be returned to the present in just 1 hour. He couldn't stay longer. His machine just didn't have the power. So whatever he had to do, he couldn't be late. He approached a hansom cab, and the driver called down, "Where to, mate?" "To Friars Court, driver, and put your foot down." "I mean, hurry your horse along. Better be careful. Someone might guess he doesn't belong." As the hansom cab gave Jonathan a peaceful ride, he contemplated on the coming petrol tide. Was there really anything he could do to prevent it? Well, he was certainly going to do his damnedest. He gave the driver a florin of the full legal tender. He had to be careful of the dates on the money he tried to render. He knocked on the door, but there was no one at home. So he smashed his way in. He was quite alone. He moved quickly upstairs. It seemed a good place to look. He was searching for some sort of diary or book. Upstairs, a large portrait stared down at him from the wall. There was definitely something familiar about the features, but just what he couldn't recall. Had he met her daughter? Anyway, he didn't have time to falter. He found her workshop. It was on the same floor. Now over her notes and plans he started to pore. Yes, yes, she was on the right track. Her drawings and motor model proved that. Piles of parcels were heaped on the next table. He glanced at them briefly and saw "wedding present" on the label. He didn't look closer. There was really nothing more to learn. But at least there was something he could burn. An oil lamp provided the necessary accelerant. All this criminal activity was making him feel quite exuberant. He heaped everything flammable on the table, higher and higher. Everything to do with the motor car would be destroyed by fire. As the flames caught hold, there was the sound of a horse arriving. Miss Young was home, and would soon learn that he'd been conniving to destroy her work. She was the one person he didn't want to meet. The only place now for him was out on the street. He'd better not go out the front. Miss Young was going to be a bit sore. He'd best make his escape through the back door. As he sought safety away from the burning building, Mary Rose Young entered. She saw the smoke and realized in her workshop it was centered. She grabbed a bucket, the flames, to try and stem. "My drawings, my plans," she screamed. "I must try and save them." Jonathan didn't intend it, but these were to be her very last words. The explosion was so loud, over half the city it was heard. A large drum of petrol had gone up with a blast. Johnathon Humphreys had indeed altered the past. Rosemary Young and her invention had gone forever, blown away on the tide of time, just like a feather. Jonathan's dream was now a reality. His actions had stopped the motor car with dramatic finality. Now, in the 1990s, the motor car still hadn't been invented. Not even a spark plug had been patented. The sound of the motor car Jonathan's ears would no longer injure. But the trouble was, without that past, he wasn't a part of this future. When he'd been looking at the portrait, he shouldn't have been so blind. He should have spent more time the family resemblance to find. But really, it was basically all the computer's fault. Jonathan wasn't to blame. It just hadn't bothered to mention that Rosemary Young was his grandmother's maiden name.